Today's turning gets a little personal. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today, we're going to turn one of my favorite tree species to turn, and that is honey locust. And honey locust is one of my favorites to turn because it's kind of personal. And I'm going to share some of that personal side of the story with you as we turn. So I'm going to round this off on the bandsaw first and then bring it back over to the lathe and get started. So let's head over to the bandsaw.
Normally with a piece this size, I could put that on the lathe and just knock those corners off. And I could do that with this, but it's going to take a little bit extra effort. This wood was cut quite a while ago, and it's very dry and very hard. As a matter of fact, I've heard stories that the railroad companies used to grow locusts, both honey locusts and black locusts, to make railroad ties with because it was just indestructible and would last a very long time, which I believe because this is very hard wood. Okay, I'm going to mount this to the lathe using my spur drive center. I'm kind of eyeballing and trying to decide which side I'm going to have up. I'm going to make this the up side. And I'll bring my tailstock in. The reason I like to use the tailstock and to mount this piece between centers is it's very adjustable. I want to get the top rim relatively flush. So here I can loosen the tailstock and just simply readjust that top rim and get it closer to being true. I don't mind how the bottom turns because that's going to get shaped into the tenon. But I'm going to clean up this outer edge first and develop a nice clean cylinder so I can see exactly what I have as far as a shape to be working with. So I'm going to take my time. This is my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. Now this wood is very hard, so I can't make very quick, deep passes and rough out the material. Instead, I need to work at the pace of the wood, and I need to remember to continuously be tightening my tailstock as I go. It's important to just let your tool do the work. You can see I have a small portion of the bowl gouge doing the cutting at this point. I'm not trying to overload that edge. I'm not trying to make it deeper in the cut because it really can't handle it. This is very hard wood. I hear a lot of times people talk about wood. Actually, I had somebody that told me, they said, you better turn this honey locust before it dries because once it's dry, you can't turn it. Well, that's not true. You can turn any wood. You basically just need very good sharp tools and you need to work with the wood itself. You need to cut at the pace the tool will work. Here you can see I'm taking a pretty decent pass here and the tool is cutting very well. It's sharp and I have to sharpen frequently with a harder piece like this. Also, the tip of this bowl gouge gets really hot. So if you have your hand anywhere near the first few inches of this bowl gouge, there's a lot of heat built up there because of the friction and the density of this wood. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. You're just going to have to sharpen your tool frequently. Okay, it's looking pretty good. It's coming around. I've got some areas that need to be reduced still, so I'm going to take some more material off here. So I probably would have never been introduced to honey locust or not even been aware of it if it weren't for the fact that my parents had this growing in their yard. And I happened to be visiting them when they decided they had had enough. All of the seed pods that this tree drops, they were really sick of them building up in the yard and having to pick them up every fall. So they decided they're going to take the tree down. And to my surprise, when the tree came down, it was unbelievably gorgeous inside. Unfortunately, my parents live a long distance from where I lived, and I needed to bring this back in my car. And I have, over the years, brought tons of this back. I'm cleaning up this top edge, so I've got a really good smooth surface here, and I can see where the top of the bowl is going to be. This gives me a good idea visually to line everything up. I'm just using a scraping cut here. So I had to bring this back one piece at a time in my car. Well, multiple pieces, multiple car trips as well. And my brother helped me. He does a lot of woodwork as far as gathering wood for firewood in the winter. So he was able to help me cut this and process it and store it and keep it where I can get some pieces of it. Unfortunately, this is running out. I don't have many more pieces of this, and there's no more of this tree. This tree was actually really special. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So I'm back to using my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept-back bowl gouge. I'm using that to rough out the curved bottom portion of this bowl. And you can see these cuts aren't very deep, but that goes back to the density of this wood and how much material I can cut efficiently with this bowl gouge. If this bowl gouge were dull, I wouldn't be able to cut this much. So I'm taking my time. I'm essentially just rotating my body and shifting my weight to make that curve. Now I'm going to switch over and flatten off the face of this. As you remember, when we mounted this between centers, the front or the top of the bowl is relatively flat, but that made the bottom portion just a little bit off. So I had to remove some of the high spots there before I can get down to a smooth cut right here. So I'm going to go ahead and smooth this off. I'm switching my half inch. The half inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge is great for just real simple smoothing cuts there. I'm going to go ahead and mark where the tenon will be. And then I'm going to shape the cylinder that will become the tenon and the shoulder. This I typically do with the half inch bowl gouge. Now it's important to again, let the tool do the work. I'm pushing this into the wood, but I'm not applying a ton of pressure, and I'm not forcing this. This wood is hard enough that if I push hard with the tool, even with it sharp, it'll most likely bog down and stop the lathe, because it takes a lot of effort to cut through this material. But again, it really doesn't matter how hard the wood is. I'm sure there's probably some incredibly dense woods that would be difficult, but hardwood in general is easy to turn if you have good sharp tools. Now, I've got a course all about tool sharpening. It also deals with all of the shaping of tools. If you would like to turn with a 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge like mine, you can actually buy any bowl gouge and shape it to that 55-degree profile. And I show you exactly how to do that in my tool sharpening course. So you may want to check that out. Now I'm going to refine the curve at the base of this bowl, and I'm using a pull cut and a scraping cut here to shape down to what that foot will be. I'm going to be shaping the tenon, or rather the shoulder, to become the foot of the bowl. I'm imagining this bowl is going to be a little bit more utilitarian, a little more functional, so I'm not going to put a really small base on it. I'm going to give it a nice wide base so that it can hold some fruit or vegetables, things like that. And if some of those are sitting on just one side of the bowl, it won't fall over very easily with a nice wide base. So I'm taking my time and I'm shaping this bottom curve first and establishing that. So if you think about connecting point A to point B, so A being the bottom of the bowl here and B being the top of the bowl, I just need to develop the curve that's going to go from there up to the top rim. So I'm shaping the way that foot will appear, and then using the scraping cut and the shear scraping cut to make this curve flow nice and fluid out of that foot area. Now you can see it's coming to a point here on the side of the bowl. Obviously, we could leave that, but that's not a really great design. I prefer to make nice fluid curves from the bottom to the top. So now I'm going to switch around to a push cut, and I'm going to continue that curve and bring it around up to the top of the bowl. There you go. Now you can see that, the shape a little bit better. Now, like I said before, we need to sharpen frequently, especially with dense material like this. This bowl gouge is really hot right now. So I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this, clean up that edge. It doesn't take much. Once you have your setup established for tool sharpening, it doesn't take much to bring that edge right back to a nice crisp sharpness that's ready to cut the hardest material you can bring. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and sharpen both my gouges. That was my 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to switch over to my larger 5/8 inch bowl gouge. Now I'm putting these into the jig and then lightly tightening it. Then I use my depth gauge here. My depth gauge is set to 2 inches. And I have a 2-inch protrusion from the jig so that I can make these nice, deep, swinging curves that you're seeing right here that establish those long wings that are used for scraping and for shear scraping. Okay, so I'm going to go right back over here, and as I just mentioned, I'm going to use the shear scrape to continue to refine the curve of the bottom of the bowl. So I've established the very bottom portion, and I'm going to bring that curve around, and the shear scrape is the way to do that. I've got a video all about the shear scrape. If you haven't seen it, you really want to check that out. It's a great technique to use that's going to allow you to make really subtle refinements without dramatically changing the shape of your bowl. When you do the shear scrape correctly, you can get a surface that needs very little sanding. Now I'm going to reverse and I'm going to shear scrape the front or the top of the bowl, and I'm bringing this top edge down. I want this to be a slightly closed rim, meaning the rim is going to be just slightly narrower than the widest part of the bowl. Again, it has to do with maintaining this nice fluid curve from the bottom of the bowl all the way to the top. Take your time and make light shaving shear cuts or shear scrapes here, and you can get that surface really, really nice. Now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to refine this corner using my spindle detail gouge. I'm going to get down in here and clean up this corner for the foot, and then I also need to establish the connection for the angle of the tenon. Basically work down into that corner and I can scrape out and flatten out the surface for that tenon connection. Got a little bit of an edge here. I want to clean that up. There it is. Just a touch more. So I want to take your time here. All right, it's looking really good. Okay, so we have the outside of the bowl shaped, and we're going to turn it around and mount it in the 4-jaw chuck. So the honey locust, this particular honey locust came from the Midwest. In the United States, the middle part of the country is called the Midwest. And this was growing in my parents' yard, but it had been there since I was pretty young. And it didn't occur to me until I started turning this. I actually had some on the lathe, and it hit me all of a sudden. I'm like, wait a minute. Hold on, let me explain this to you too. Okay, so any turning that we do is not going to turn 100% true. Keep in mind, we're dealing with a plant here. We're turning a raw resource, a tree. It's not perfectly precise. So I get this question a lot. People ask me, well, I turn my bowl around and it's not turning like perfectly smooth. It's very rare that it will. What you can do, I'm using the shear scrape here to basically straighten out that side a little bit. And that's going to be important to clean that up. So now it is truly turning true, because I'm going to make these walls really thin. If I didn't do that and I make the walls really thin, I run the risk of, number one, going through the sidewall. But number two, you're going to be able to see a thick and a thin spot on that wall. So instead, you take a little bit of time and true this back up before you put it back on the lathe or before you start cleaning out the center. So it didn't hit me until after I was turning this. Now I've been turning pieces of this tree for several years now, and I had some really big chunks that I made some other really nice big bowls with, which I'm really happy with. But I'm getting down to my last few pieces. So it's a little bit unnerving that this tree's not going to be here anymore. But essentially it didn't hit me until I was on the lathe that I grew up with this tree, and this tree actually watched me grow up. This tree was positioned outside our house, outside the back door, which we left from the back door all the time going to the driveway where the car was parked. And it was between the back door and the driveway. So I literally saw this tree every single time I came and went from the house as I was growing up. And so that was kind of really cool. And you know, I know I get it's sentimental and all that, but it's pretty meaningful. And it just hit me. I was recently doing some photos with my brother, scanning for old photos, and we came across all these old pictures, and I came across some pictures of this tree as it was growing up, and as it grew up with us too, which was pretty cool. So check this out. This is the tree not long after it was purchased and planted. This has to be in the 1980s, early 1980s. Yeah, it's definitely early 80s. Here's a picture of my brother, my younger brother, who actually helped me with these photos and helped the scanning. This is my brother Matt on the right in the snow. You can see the tree is not much older here. And then later, here's my high school prom picture with my Plymouth Belvedere in the driveway. Oh man, all the memories. And yeah, so the tree's quite a bit larger now. And then here's later with my wife, the tree's in the background. And this is probably, I don't even know, maybe 10 years before the tree was taken down. It's pretty amazing that a little discount tree in a pot could be purchased, planted, and grow so much in that time period and also be a part of so many people's lives. So it's pretty meaningful to turn these pieces. I don't know how to explain it. It's just a really, really cool thing to be able to have something like this, a piece of my family history that I'm able to turn here and have piece of this in the house is actually really, really cool. So this is a pretty special type of wood. And now I've come across other honey locust trees since then, and I just fell in love with this species as far as turning because, again, this wood is really dense. It dries well, it doesn't move a lot, and I know it's going to turn out well when I put this on the lathe. So I'm using my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back to work this inside wall down and get this all cleaned up. You can see I've got the rim and the walls of this pretty narrow, pretty thin. And what I'm doing is I'm just working my way down and I'm removing the center mass as I go. And as I remove this, I won't return to the top edge of that rim. If I go back to that top edge, it's really thin, and I try to turn it. Now, I might be able to turn a little bit, but if I get a catch or if I get some chatter, that thin material can break really easy. And with no support in the center from that center mass, this could easily just blow apart. A lot of people that have bowls, quote unquote, blow apart, usually happen when at about this stage they decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to go back and change that rim a little bit. I think I want to round it off, or I want to give it a different shape. And they start rethinking the rim and they go back to that rim. And that, with a combination of having the lathe going too fast, yeah, you can blow out sections of that wall and send them flying across your shop. So you don't want to go all the way back to the top of the rim. You can see what I'm doing here is I'm rubbing that bevel and I'm feeling where the previous cut was, and then I'm very lightly engaging that. Now, right now I'm using the left side of the gouge to clear away this material in the center. And this is actually really advantageous too, because I need to sharpen this bowl gouge frequently, and I need the bowl gouge to be balanced. So that means I have to sharpen both sides, whether I use that side or not. So I might as well use both sides. Here I'm rubbing the bevel and just letting it catch. And just, so I'm rubbing, very light cut, and then the cut will get a little bit deeper because I have more material at the bottom of that area. But what I was getting at with the cut that I'm doing here, I'm actually using the left side of the gouge right now. When I'm doing the cut down the side of the wall, I'm using the right side of the gouge. which is great because at this moment, the right side of the gouge isn't being used or being dulled more, and it'll be sharper for me when I go back over to the wall. The point is that if you use both sides of the gouge relatively evenly, it's beneficial to you. You're going to keep a sharper edge longer because you've got more material that you're using on that edge. And you've got to sharpen it away anyway when you go over to the sharpening station if you're going to have a nice balanced bowl gouge. So now I'm going to go ahead and start making passes to replicate the inside of the bottom. This is a good time, especially if you're starting out turning. This is a good time to make nice light cuts and passes. Imagine that each of these passes is your last cut. Well, you don't want to do that. You don't want to push through the center. But if you were to imagine that each one of these passes is your last pass for the bowl, you can practice that cut until you're actually down to the bottom of the bowl, and then you're ready to make that cut. Now, one of the things you don't want to do when you get to the bottom of the bowl is push through the center, because you're going to rip out fibers in the very middle bottom of the bowl. Instead, you want to slow down, close the flute, meaning turning it to about the 3 o'clock position, and then letting it do the cut. And it'll actually take a while to cut that center part out. And I'll show you that in just a second. Here I'm rubbing the bevel and picking up the cut. The bottom of this, the wall at the bottom portion of the bowl is just a little bit thicker than the side walls, and that's what we want. We want to basically just keep sneaking up on the ideal thickness. Stop frequently, use your fingers, and determine how thick that wall is. All right, I'm going to remove the material here. I'm going to take my time. This is not a time to rush. You want to go nice and slow here when you're getting down into the inside bottom of the bowl. So you can see I'm closing the flute to the right. It's almost at a 90-degree angle. I'm going to rub the bevel and pick up the cut. Go slow, close the flute, and just let the edge make the cut right here. All right. It looks pretty good. There's like there's another pattern of like a branch in there. It looks really, really nice. So I'm going to take my time and I'm going to sand this. I'm starting at 120 grit. I'll work through 180, 240, and 320, and 400. Now what I'm not doing is I'm not going across the center and the inside. It kind of looked like I was there, but I'm not. You want to do that by hand, or with the lathe off rather, because you will make an extra divot in there if you go across the center. Now I'm going to show you a trick that I'm doing. I'm switching up to my 180 grit. I usually don't do this with my most aggressive grit. My most aggressive in this case is the 120. When I get down to the 180, I'm going to clean that rim a little bit, but I'm going to use this little trick. I'm going to take and I'm going to roll over the inside of the bowl, not the outside, just the inside. And I'm going to do that with each of the grits as I go, and it's going to make that wall appear even thinner. I'm going to apply tried and true original finish. This is linseed oil and beeswax. I have this in a jar, so it's out of its main container, but this is not homemade. This is a product that I purchased. I'm not sponsored by them. It's just a really good product that I like using and recommending because it's really, really nice. Very simple. It's food safe. We're basically going to apply a thin coat, just enough to put finish on the wood surface. If you see finish on the wood surface, you're good. You don't need any more than that. The grain of the wood looks so nice with this finish applied to it. You can see the chatoyance there. Those are side grains that are moving against the main grains. It is just, the wood itself is gorgeous. It turns so well. This finish is so nice on it. I love turning this. And I need to find another honey locust tree. It won't be as special as this tree, but I need to get another one because it is really nice wood to turn. And I highly recommend, if you have honey locusts anywhere near you, to keep your ears open for anybody taking one of these trees down, because this is really, really nice wood to turn and you don't want it to go to waste. Look at that pattern and that texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait 1 hour, and then I'm going to remove any excess material. And this is really important because you don't want there to be any thick areas that'll get gummy. And obviously we don't want that. on the finish. We just want a nice smooth finish on the piece. Now I'm going to have to wait and burnish this 24 hours from now, but this is the piece right now. Wow. Again, look at those patterns. Look at the wood grain and the patterns, and I'm seeing my whole life right there. Each one of those wood grain layers saw a part of my life at some point. It's just kind of crazy to think about it that way. What a fun piece. I love turning this wood. There's a little bit of a check there, but that's not a problem. It's not a structural issue.
So here's the final piece. I think it turned out great. I love these relatively thin walls, and the overall appearance of this wood is just gorgeous. And now you know why I'm so attached to honey locust. Also, I haven't finished this completely because I'm going to wait 24 hours to burnish the finish on this. And I like to do that on the lathe. And I do that with the 4/0 steel wool to burnish this in really well. And then at that point, I'll take this tenon off and I'll finish shaping the foot. But you guys have seen me do that plenty of times. Now, this brings up a really good point, which is you really want to read the directions for the finish that you're using. This is tried and true original finish. And what they recommend is that you apply a thin coat, just enough to coat the surface. If you're seeing finish on the wood, you have enough. You do not want this to go on thick because it'll get all gummy and it won't be good. Then you let it set for an hour, wipe off any excess. You guys saw me do that. Now, at that point, you let it go 24 hours and then you burnish it to a nice luster. Now, here's the thing. You can take this finish and just wipe it on and wipe it off, and it'll look okay. It's not going to thoroughly protect the wood as well as it will if you follow the directions. If you follow directions, it's going to have time to attach itself to the wood, if you will. The other thing to keep in mind is all finishes need to cure. This has at least a 72-hour curing time. So in other words, don't apply the finish and then go put some food in this and use it to serve with. Don't expect to be able to do it that quickly. Let this finish cure and harden on the wood, and you're going to have better long-term results. So keep that in mind. Read your finish instructions and follow those. I think this turned out really nice. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let me know what you think about the fact that this is a pretty special tree for me as well. So leave me a comment below. I'd greatly appreciate that. All right, guys, if you've liked this video, do me a huge favor and click that like button. Thank you. It helps this video, it helps the channel, and I appreciate you doing that. Thanks. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribing, and check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Over there, I've got everything, including online courses to help you learn how to turn wood bowls. So check it out, turnawoodbowl.com. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching, and as always, until next time, happy turning.